Geology is full of a best answer, an okay answer, and then a couple of bad answers. There's no right answer. And you're just going to have to be okay with that and have to think critically and be okay with, we don't know, but here's what is probably right, or here's what might be the current working hypothesis. Because it's a historical science. We look back at an incomplete record and we make a story out of it. And there's this huge cascading effect from that. And I'm looking at the job market for professors, and half of the job ads for professors at research schools in the United States are for something to do with critical minerals, economic geology type stuff.
Welcome to Ore-atory. Today I am joined by Dr. Jesse Reimink, Professor of Geosciences at Penn State University and the Rudy Slingerland Early Career Professor of Geoscience. Jesse's research explores early crust formation, isotope geochemistry, and analytical instrumentation, but he's also committed to public science education. As co-host of the Planet Geo podcast, which I had the pleasure of being a guest on, and co-creator of Camp Geo mobile learning platform, Jesse is helping geoscience evolve with new tools and approaches. In this episode today, we will talk about a whole lot of things, but some of what I'm aiming to be how geoscience education is changing, what he's learned from years of podcasting, and dive into some areas of critical minerals and creating new important research questions with that in mind. So this is the Science Communicator's Dilemma. I don't know how we came up with that title, but there we are. So welcome, Jesse. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much, Lindsey. It's fun to be on your podcast. It's great. I'm excited to. This is the first time I think the script has been flipped on me. So forgive me if I'm a little nervous.
Turned.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have to say, you guys were such great hosts and interviewers. And I had an amazing time on your podcast that sort of like it maintains the bar for me. And
I appreciate that. I think that, what was it, going back now, several months probably. We always are, every time we interview somebody, about geoscience, it's great, and we're very excited at the afterwards. But after talking with you and speaking with you about the employment opportunities and what it means for students, I mean, both Chris and I were extremely fired up after talking to you. So the emotion is shared for sure.
Well, it was really interesting. So, behind the scenes, you and I were talking about podcasts and life and other things. But, I don't know that any podcast I've ever been on that I've had so many people reach out afterwards. So
really?
There's probably been 20 to 30 people that have reached out to me directly after did your podcast. So some like very, very quickly, and others, like randomly I'll pop open LinkedIn and I'll have a message or something and say, oh, hey, I saw you on Planet Geo and da-da-da. And some are like, hey, let's chat, or I could use your help, or I really want to get into mining.
Cool.
And others were just like, hey, that was a really cool episode. So I was blown away by how engaged your audience is, and that they actually wanted to talk to me, because I was like, I'm a one-off, but it was really a fun conversation.
Oh, absolutely not. One in a million, 1 in 100 million, whatever that phrase is. No, that's really nice to hear. Thank you for passing that along, because it's always, we get feedback, we get emails, we get, sort of contact us things from our app, and many of them are very complimentary and very engaged, but sometimes they're more on the side of like suggestions. Here's an episode, you should do this episode, which is great to hear. Like, we love hearing that, but it's good to hear about the impact in other ways too. So yeah, thanks for passing that along.
Absolutely. Well, I totally enjoyed it. And so, we know that you guys have been at it for a while, 5 years or so. What was the genesis of Planet Geo?
Really, we'd started talking about it before COVID, like really in those several months leading up to COVID, because really the genesis was a couple sources. The real genesis, I called Chris and said, hey, do you want to do a podcast for me with me? And he was like, what? But before that, it was thinking, I had a couple people close to me in my life who were listening to podcasts regularly, who conveyed the appreciation for listening to the relationship and understanding that listening to two friends talking was really the hook, and then the content or the learning that happened as a part of that was just kind of an accessory to it. And so then, I had spent some time looking around the podcast's geoscience landscape, and there was a few, but I thought that Chris is an amazing teacher, as anybody who listens to our podcast will understand. And I kind of viewed it as the podcast was me getting his educational acumen into this media space that I felt like I could figure out or understood a little bit. And we had a relationship, a long friendship that hopefully kind of came across and resonated and helped have that be like a vector for teaching people about the earth in a way.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the origin of it. And I'm sure it's like this podcast. This is a bit of a slow burn. It takes a while to get its hooks in, and then we're still learning a lot as we go along through it. So
I mean, as you do, right? And once you think you figure it out, you learn something else, and that's
totally.
sort of the beauty of life and podcasting and everything else. I think.
I mean, it's the fun of it too, right? If you figure it out,
absolutely.
It's like, okay, well, that's done. I figured that out. What's next?
I don't know that everybody is that way, but I think we probably are the same in that sentiment. But I certainly find that. And for me, I love the idea of talking to somebody and extracting all of these really cool little nuggets of knowledge and have it be sort of a dynamic conversation where we get to share all of their passion and enthusiasm for what they get to do every day. And that to me is sort of magical because it gets other people excited. And I think sometimes we wind up falling into little ruts of whatever we're doing, and to find a little bit of energy or a little spark from listening to something like this and saying, oh my gosh, I've never thought of it that way, or this was just really cool, and sort of fill somebody's cup a little bit. That's
definitely
that part.
I agree. And you develop at least I do with the podcasters that I listen to regularly. You develop a sort of a pseudo friendship. I forget what they call it in the audio space, but you really get to feel like you know the people pretty well, and it helps with the engagement. I mean, the investing podcasts I listen to, I love, and I listen to them regularly. I spend an hour with this person a week hearing what they think about various topics. It's a really cool avenue, both from the consumer side. I really like podcasts from listening to them. So anyway.
Well, there's so many ways of sort of getting new knowledge, right? And I think podcasts are one of those ways, at least for me. And we all consume information differently, right? But I found that for us, the shorts that we clip out of these things have such high engagement and like really resonate, and then get other people to go listen to the longer format scenario. And so I don't know if that's sort of what all of a sudden hit for us midway through this year, but it's certainly been one of those areas where we can kind of dive in and even say like, hey, maybe we want to do a little case study on this, or figure out another way of talking about it, because a lot of people are paying attention. So
that's really interesting. So that's been a successful avenue, so getting the short format, sort of vertical format type stuff. Oh, that's cool. That's good to hear.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so it's been kind of fun. But like you said, you're always learning and figuring out a new way or a new thing, or what makes sense to people. And it's usually never what I expect.
No, that's exactly right. All the things, like we think about this with our podcast episodes, like all the ones that were like, oh, that's cool, that's fun. And, they do. It's fine, but it doesn't take off. And then we do these ones where we're like, okay, I don't know, we'll do an episode on that. And all of a sudden it's like a really popular episode. And
every time.
It's amazing. Yeah. Hard to figure out.
So I won't claim to try to know what the formula is at this point.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
You've got a whole lot of life going on at this point. And so like you're teaching, you're researching, you're podcasting, you do some consulting. That's a lot of stuff. So let's talk about sort of like, what does that look like in practice, and how do you possibly manage all of that, plus family and all of that stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I'm probably like a lot of geologists are kind of, you get into it because you love it, and you get into it. Like, I've always liked rocks. I've always liked minerals. I like science. I like data. So a lot of the stuff doesn't really feel like work. So I can kind of quote unquote work a lot, I think, because a lot of it's fun. I love sitting down and, with Chris and we come up with, there's a podcast idea, and I get to sit down and learn about it for a couple hours while we're writing a script. Like, that's really fun. So, And then the same thing goes for the sort of consulting thing is a new avenue, which I'm definitely not an expert in. I'm trying to figure out a little bit, and I appreciate any advice you have on that front. But it's, again, same to the thing, kind of trying to think from a more business-minded standpoint, startups and things like that. I think it's really interesting. It's fun to learn new places. So I'm not sure that's a good non-answer probably, but most of it's fun.
A very reasonable answer. And I, growing up, watching my dad be a recruiter, his favorite roles to fill were always geology.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
And so it is interesting because we fill a whole lot of different things, right? From maintenance to processing to, business functions within mining companies. And, it wasn't until I did enough recruiting that I sort of saw why that was for him. And he came from like a liberal arts sort of background and was creative, and we work in a very technical area. And not to say that geology is not highly technical, but his explanation of why he loved geologists and talking to them was because they were always optimistic. They were creative. They had to understand, at least most of them had to understand sort of the mine engineering side, as well as like, where it came from and how to marry all of that together. And he said, look, it's magic. And they ooze enthusiasm for it. And so why would I not want to
really
recruit
cool.
for that?
Yeah,
so,
totally.
As a function, we've always worked a lot of geology roles. And as I said, I can't necessarily argue with him, but geologists seem to have a lot of creative passions on the side that like dovetail into work.
Oh, yeah.
They're like always a consultant on top of whatever else they're doing.
Something else. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. I think there's, it is definitely, it's a historical science. And so it's, I run into this when I teach intro to geology. Physical geology is the class name, but I teach it to the engineers, a lot of mining engineers in our university, in the college I'm in. A lot of mining engineers, they have to take this class for accreditation, and it's like one of the only geoscience classes they have to take. So a bunch of engineers sitting in the room, and the first lecture, I always have to say, here's the problem you're going to have. You are going to want an answer, and geology is full of a best answer, an okay answer, and then a couple of bad answers. There's no right answer. And you're just going to have to be okay with that and have to think critically and be okay with, we don't know, but here's what is probably right, or here's what might be the current working hypothesis. Because it's a historical science. We look back at an incomplete record and we make a story out of it. That's really what we're doing. And then we have to hypothesis test that story and look at new data, collect new data. But it does, I think you're exactly right. It attracts a more artistic form of scientists than maybe some of the other fields that are perhaps more answer driven. And there's great frustration. I experience frustration in geology a lot too, especially with my research in early earth geochemistry. We're just probably never going to know the right answer. So it's a little bit unsatisfying because we're just telling different stories
and trying to figure it out and adding different puzzle pieces.
Two different people with two very different stories yelling at each other at a conference, and it's like, oh, this is frustrating, So there's some unsatisfying parts to that too. But you're right, it attracts a fun group of people to the field.
It is a great group of people, right? And I find that they are not adverse to risk. They're creative. No. They're great communicators for the most part. We do talk a lot about rocks and drill holes, but
yeah. No, that's right. That's a really good. The risk thing I think is really important. I think geoscience. We had this series in the spring where we were kind of thinking about what is the value of a geoscience degree, basically, and I think one of them is risk. We have a lot of alumni from our department here at Penn State who have gone on to do really well in various industries, some of them not related to geoscience at all. And I think in business, and I think a lot of that we're just kind of naturally good at risk evaluation, not necessarily physical risk, but downside risk. What if this idea is wrong? How do we troubleshoot that? How do we decrease the probability that idea is wrong? It's something that's kind of, I think, native to the field a little bit that we don't talk about too much, that I think we should talk about more. I mean, I'd met this I maybe told you this before, but several people who gotten geology degrees and then went on to run a big venture fund or a big investment group. And he was like, I love hiring geologists because they just think about the world differently than your normal scientists. That bridge between the two is really important. Risk and data driven, but artistic and storytelling. Like, it's a really valuable combination. So anyway.
I think they make great entrepreneurs, and I think that's why we have so many junior companies, right? Because they're like, this is a great idea, and I understand it. I'm passionate about it. I'm going to make this happen.
Let's go do it. Screw it. I'm going to try. Yeah.
Yes,
love it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so many other things, right? What from, the technical side with computer stuff and creating new technologies to go around it, or just other businesses, like you said, venture funds. But I find that they're probably one of the more entrepreneurial groups that I get to work with.
Oh, that's good to that's good to hear. We just started an entrepreneurship program at Penn State here. It's a minor program. Students can get a minor in entrepreneurship on energy transition science, basically, in our college now. And so, it's good to hear that, because we're leaning into the entrepreneurship within geoscience here at Penn State. So hopefully, just trying to make that more obvious that this happens, that this is a phenomenon. So
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. And I don't know, I don't get to work with an immense amount of students. And so I don't know how they're leaning at this point. But I'm curious, because I feel like education is changing so significantly with AI and how we're consuming knowledge. And my kid comes home from high school and he doesn't have books. And I'm like, how do you learn? What's going on?
What's going on here?
Like, how can I help? I need to eavesdrop on what's happening in math or whatever it is.
Right.
Probably not math. That's not my jam, but anything else.
Something.
And something, please, that isn't on a computer screen as I'm sitting in front of a computer screen talking to you.
Yeah.
But, how is that for you as an educator and watching this happen so quickly in real time?
Yeah. It's a great, man, what a complicated question. And I don't claim to have the answer here with any of this, but it's certainly a period of transition, both at higher ed in general, as we see the priorities shift in funding structures. We see students, reevaluating whether they go to college or not for the price tag that college is. I mean, it's gotten ridiculously expensive, and so there's an increased emphasis on value add for students and what that value actually means. And I don't know the right answer. I think sometimes we're at risk of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's some valid complaints to level against higher ed, I think, for sure. Like, some things need to change, but not too dramatically necessarily. I think some minor tweaks. But I think within the geosciences is an extremely exciting time. Like, I am so excited to be a geology professor right now at this current time, as critical minerals becomes such a big, we're sort of reevaluating the supply chains. We have this whole new suite of minerals that matter to society in a really deep way. And the answers are going to be engineering and geology and chemical engineering. All sorts of fields will be brought to bear on it, but it's just a really exciting time to be a geology professor, I think. So,
well, I'm glad that you say that, because I guess two directions with this, and I'm going to try to stay organized in weird. I have all the things.
The other benefit of podcasts is they just ramble conversations that go. You never know where you're going. It's great.
You never know. So I was at a meeting recently. Well, I guess this has been 3 meetings in a row that I've gone to, where I've had conversations with individuals who sit on the boards of mining colleges.
Oh, okay.
And ultimately, there are so many scholarships for individuals that want to seek mining degrees that, with as many as are graduating with an engineering degree, so I don't know if they're counting geologists, but 99% of them could have a full ride if they sought out all of the opportunities out there for scholarships.
Wow.
And so I am certain that some of those would certainly extend to geosciences. And if not, we could probably modify them to do so.
Right.
There is a lot of money in it. And that's at schools. I mean, there are not that many mining schools technically, but they don't have to go to a mining school. They have to be in an engineering field. There's a lot of different stuff. And so
that's really interesting.
That's amazing, right? And so if you have professors that are enthusiastic about what they're teaching and can hook their students, and you have an avenue to not have massive amounts of student loans. Like, you have a gateway into a profession that is just immensely really cool and leaning towards a lot of awesome stuff ahead, right?
And I think
not going anywhere.
No, I think that's right. And I think we're seeing the signals from all sorts of different avenues. I mean, whether it's I was talking to some people who are on the boards of the professional geology licensure process of various aspects. And they're just like, we need more professional geologists. It's very clear out in the economy that we need more of these people who get this license process. So that's a signal. That's like more probably, there's a lot of environmental consulting needs. There's the mining sector, the exploration sector. I just think it's there's a huge amount of potential, and we have not trained very many in our field. Our geoscience majors, geology or geoscience major degree programs have been being closed and shifting more towards environmental science or earth science or some more general science category, which means if you can get a geoscience degree, that's probably going to be more valuable in the future too, because there's going to be less of you. So I just think it's a good time. I mean, I'd like to think that's probably a little glass half full, but I'd like to think it's a good time to get these kind of degrees.
I don't think it's a glass half full situation at all. And in my practice, the last year, we've had more geosciences roles than any other role.
Oh, really? Oh, that's really interesting.
That's good
to hear.
I say these things come in waves, but we are certainly in a wave of geosciences.
That's really interesting.
Geophysics, geochemistry, just geology, from production, and most of them are not in operating companies. They're in consulting companies. And so having a broad base of knowledge where you can go into and understand and be that technical expert, because they don't have them in mining companies necessarily. You've got, mine geologist, a production geologist, somebody that's focused on something very specific. And so they need all of this sort of underbelly of knowledge in order to push forward, or when they find a problem, to figure out how to solve it.
So it's a really interesting, I think, sitting in the nexus between, of education and industry and kind of paying attention to that. It's tough to figure out what courses do we put into this, because for good reason, probably for some good reasons, the geology major, what was a geology degree when I went through, has been broadened. Like, there's all sorts of different topics that we need to teach. Data science now. We need to teach like risk evaluation, physical. Really broaden the courses, which means you got to get rid of some. And so what that typically happens is, mineralogy or the 3 petrology classes become 1. And you kind of decrease the amount of content. And that's what we've done at Penn State. That's what other universities have, a lot of universities have done, even if you keep the program. So it's hard to navigate that, right? Because the fundamentals matter so much. Like understanding minerals and rocks, to me, that's really fundamental to everything. But then if you do that, you miss out on teaching students like these new waves of technology, the new like data science, really complicated, dealing with complicated data sets. So it's tough to navigate. And then that's aside from all of the online education that occurs, or the kind of influencers, excellent science communicator influencers on social media, or the people on YouTube who have a really big following and are doing, I would say, mostly great science communication work and really teaching fundamentally. I would say YouTube and podcasts, is a lot of teaching goes on there. So that's another interesting avenue of the changing education landscape.
Oh my God. That I won't claim to try to figure out at all, but
me neither.
Well, I can't really understate how dramatic the increase in our need for geosciences broadly has become, and statistically,
what's the time frame? When did that ramp up start? Where are we at the early phases, do you think, or are we at peak need? Or
no, I think we're at the early phases. I think it's going to continue. I think specifically with the idea of critical minerals, with the idea of some of the mines coming online with the Fast 41 program, that we add water into this, right? So hydrology, hydrogeology, that's a whole nother wing. Water continues, whether you have too much or too little, or how do you move it around or protect it. Like, that's an area that we're going to see become far more important
Yeah.
than it has been, and we don't have enough people in that. So that
Interesting.
started for me several years ago, maybe 5 years ago. We started getting routinely hydrology, hydrogeology. It started in consulting, then it started moving into operating companies. I think we'll see the same thing with the geosciences, and there are a lot of different areas to press into for that. Right now, there are a bunch of consulting groups that are cropping up that are focusing specifically on that in various different ways, whether it's mineral specific, location specific, that they could do environmental or closure or whatever end that it's falling on. But I don't think we're at peak. I think we're just at the tipping point. I think that we've covered this to the ability that we can, but that it's going to like really accelerate.
Continue. Yeah. That's really interesting. So I mean, maybe if I could ask another question, even though
it's okay. We can ask each other questions.
Okay.
This is dynamic conversation.
you're like, you sit at such an interesting data node in this whole system that you probably have better data on this than anybody else out there of like what's trending, what's the future going to look. If you're trying to project what are the valuable degrees within mining, which ones should you get? Like you probably know better than anybody else. So I think of like the traditional way to look at the geoscience degree is it goes in waves, and you have oil and gas exploration expenditures, basically hydrocarbon exploration expenditures go up and down on like what, a 7, 10 year, 15 year time scale, something like that. They go up big time. They start hiring a bunch of people. There's an oil boom. It's boom times. They're hiring people. And then the undergrad enrollments will lag behind that by a couple years. So like the undergrad peak enrollment will lag behind that. And we've been through 3 to 4 cycles since the 70s of that process. And right now, since, I don't know, the last 8 years or something, we're in a trough, like clearly a trough. So do you think this is a boom bust type of thing, or do you think this is like a level up for geoscience specifically?
I think I have a hard time answering that because I don't have crystal ball. I would love to say that, like, I think we are at, as you said, we're in a trough, and I think that's across functions that have capability to go into mining, and I think that we have a reputation in mining for being dirty, for not being technologically advanced, for all sorts of reasons, right? But the reality is that it's sort of creating the ability for us to have life as we know it. And a lot of people do not think about it. And so our ability to communicate that and say, hey, you could be a STEM major, you could be somebody in legal, you could have an HR background. They're all different kinds of people and skills that need to make this work. However, if you don't like it, the opportunity is to then go in and understand it and influence it and change it. And so that's one that I think of often. That hasn't answered your question yet, but I think we've had such a poor reputation and therefore no one's interested, right?
I see.
And so when I have the conversation with people, say, how did you get into mining? It's almost always an accident or a family member was in it. And so the ability to communicate the story at an early phase, elementary school, middle school, high school, and have people interested in rocks and geoscience and what does it take to make something cool. You want a cell phone, you want a car, you want a house, you want plumbing, you want, fertilizer for your farm. Turns out it's coming from mining. And so being able to tell that story kind of leads into the opportunity for us to educate them. I am probably not the best person to answer, do we need bachelor's, master's, PhDs? My answer would be unequivocally yes, because there are so many people that figure out how to do this and then go into consulting or educate. And I find that very, very important. So being in a trough, I think that there are so few people coming out with mining degrees that are focused on this that we need them so badly that we have to see an increase or we're screwed. I don't know what else to say about it.
I agree completely. I mean, and there's so many avenues, so many lenses with which to think about this problem, societal, national defense. I mean, there's all sorts of ways all sorts of different lenses to put this on, and all of them point up and to the right for critical minerals, geoscience, all this mining sector. So it's a really exciting time. I think it's exciting. I don't know what the world will look like in 10 years, but I think we're well positioned to have an influence and put students in jobs that matter, fulfilling and rewarding.
Most of them are coming out of university and finding roles, right? But I think part of that takes outreach and opportunity to get in for co-ops or internships, etc., because they are sort of penalized to a degree if they don't have somebody that will insulate that early career portion. And so that's a different problem, right? And so I think our communicating about it, who knows who it gets to. I say that in mining, we're really good about talking about what we're great at or poor at with one another, but not outside of that. And so we sort of live in a vacuum at times. And I find that really anybody, whether they're educators or in geology or something, we all have our little silo that we play in. And so broadening that out to any degree, I think has to be advantageous for us as we move forward, which is what I admire about your podcast. Because again, like I said, I've heard from people that say, hey, I'm interested in mining. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I, like this they're trying to solve the problem. They are the solution right here in front of me. So I appreciate that you've sort of broken that silo in a different way than I perhaps can through my podcast. And so, I think there's a lot of different things that we can throw at it to try to move this forward, but I don't know.
I think it's like you said, it's an all of the above. It's do we need this or this, and the answer is yes. Do we need industry focused podcasts? Do we need basic science? Yes, we need all of it.
If I was going to pick 3, I'm going to go with 3 different degrees that I could point out and say focus on this. I think geosciences. I think processing, mineral extraction side. And I think water. Anything focusing on water. Yeah. Those 3 would be my top 3 where they're technical. I don't see how we can do it without people without, master's, PhD level research, etc., and keep moving it forward. Because there's practice and then there's all the rest of it. So those would be my top 3.
Those I think those map really well onto I would like to think what we're thinking about doing and what seems important for sure. So that's really interesting.
Well, a part of what we sort of just talked about that makes me have a question for you in terms of broadening that scope and attracting interest at earlier stages. I know that you're part of Camp Geo, and that is aimed at a high school age, college age group?
Yeah, the origin of that is, so we've got an app with a patented approach to sort of audio, basically visual podcasts is what we kind of call them, but think of the audiobooks that, or a book that has images in it, like a paper book that has some images in it, and you never see an audiobook version of that. And the reason is that audiobooks don't have a mechanism to display the images to you very well. And, we kind of have this online media is either audio only or it's video where the images and the audio are linked together. And the origin of it was that during our podcast, Chris really wanted to record a series that was basically like the intro level textbook, like the first class you take in a geology degree program, that intro level basics of geoscience class. And I was kind of against it because I was like, I don't really see this in audio. Like we these images, we need to we're talking about a silica tetrahedron for minerals. Like you got to be able to picture that. Like I can't describe that to you very well. You got to have at least some image to start with. And so that led us down this path of okay, could we do a video series? No, that doesn't really work because you got to be watching the video the whole time. So then let's rethink how it. So anyway, that led us down this path. We ended up getting a patent for this approach, and we've built basically what we're calling audio textbooks, I guess. And our main, if you go to our app, our Camp Geo app, it's available on the app stores, and probably by the time this launches, we'll have a web version that you can get on your desktop. But we have basically the intro level textbook. So the thing you would buy, that's a textbook, physical geology textbook, is there in audio form. We keep adding chapters to it, and that's freely available. And then we have some purchasable audiobooks that are more niche, the geology of Yellowstone, the geology of Grand Canyon National Park. We just did one on the geology of the Battle of Gettysburg, which was kind of fun to learn about how the geology influenced the battle and what the geological history of that area is. So things like that. So that was our target. And
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's an entrepreneurial journey, and so it scratches up.
Listen, this is all of the things that we've talked about. You've created something new. You're a geologist. You're marrying all of these things.
It's like, hey, there's a need here. Let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And so we're doing it. We're seeing how it goes, and I'm hopeful. There's people listening to it and using it and purchasing things on it, which is great. So we're excited about that, and there's some ways we're going to continue developing it and building more in different types of content for the platform, basically. So anyway, that's the origin of that. And I think, our main motivation was, hey, we want to get this intro level stuff out there. And who buys a textbook and reads a textbook anymore? Like, it's very expensive. You're never going to just sit down and read it. My students in my class, they don't like the textbook. They'd rather have a video of me on YouTube to watch than just me lecturing at them than that. So could we make something more interesting where they could listen to it on their drive in before class? Could we lean into this kind of flipped classroom model where the students' homework is to listen to the content or do something, and then in the class it's more discussion based? So that was kind of the origin of it. So it's really targeted at that intro level geology, the interested undergraduate level, but it's designed for anybody. So you could start from zero and plug into that content, I think. So yeah, I
think that's a really, really cool way of getting information out there, right? And I think that it's like a gateway drug, because if you get like the first one, then you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm hooked and I want to go on to like the Yellowstone version, or like, oh my gosh. But, there's so many cool ways of kind of relating it to something that somebody, from a historical fashion or whatever, finds their way into it. And so I appreciate that you've thought differently about it. And just to comment on how you might pursue educating your students. Like I said, I don't see my high schooler bringing home books, and I definitely see him watching tutorials on geometry on YouTube, right?
Yep,
and so
for sure.
That is certainly changing, and I think videos are great. I think specifically as we're trying to explain really complicated stuff, because I am not a technical person, but if I can see it and understand it and have a conversation about it, it makes a lot more sense to me, at least. And so I think that could keep the interest of individuals who perhaps previously wouldn't have had interest because they thought it was too technical, or they thought that they weren't good at something like that. And so I think that's a really
and I think that's
reaching new people.
And I think there's a great benefit to that too, because it's you can do it on your own. I mean, you have to be internally motivated to do this, right? Like to learn this way. But if you are internally motivated, you can listen to the same episode 5 times if you need to, and look at the images then put it in your pocket, listen to the episode, revisualize the images as we're talking about them, talking about the silicon tetrahedron for minerals or something. Like, I think it's really modular that way, and it's really adaptable to every student's learning speeds and retention differences in information retention capabilities. So it's just really adaptable in that way, but it does require, a baseline interest to be curious about it and learn. So, yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to see it adapted. We've heard from some people, several people we know have used it in their classroom setting and really like it, and use the podcast content too, which is really rewarding for us to see that used in the classroom in a more formal kind of classroom setting.
Yeah. I can imagine that would be like a big win. Like, hey.
Totally. We did this.
I haven't just created this for myself, which I feel like I tell my team all the time, I'm like, listen, I think I've got a great idea. I love ideas, and I'm a big brainstormer, and I'm like, here are about 1 million. And, sometimes you just have to throw them out there and see what sticks. And sometimes it's not always a great idea, but when you finally see it come to fruition, you're like, this might have some running room. Yeah. And that one I had the other week was actually a terrible idea. But whatever. It's okay. Yeah, I've learned from it. We've moved on. And now we're on to the next.
That's right.
So speaking on to the next, critical minerals, we've talked a little bit about it. And I know that you have some interest in critical minerals.
Yeah.
What are you seeing, I guess, as an educator, as a podcaster, as somebody that understands these very differently than I would, for example, what are you thinking the future of critical minerals really looks like? That's a very big question. We'll dive into other things. But what's got you excited about critical minerals, Jesse?
Yeah, okay. All right, maybe I can answer that one a little bit.
That's a better one.
I mean, the future of critical minerals, I think, I don't know. I mean, this is something I'm actively learning about, researching, working on. I've basically I haven't published anything on critical minerals yet, but I have a bunch of students who have worked on critical minerals like projects who are developing manuscripts. So we've got like work in progress out of my research group that I think is really exciting, that you just kind of have to look around and say, what's interesting? Let's try it out. So what's interested me about critical minerals is kind of twofold. Like I mentioned earlier, some of the the dissatisfaction with some of the research fields that I used to exist in a lot. But I still want to do early Earth research. It's still interesting. It's still exciting. I think it's still important. But I also think it's healthy to have a reset every once in a while. It's been described to me that as a professor, you need to reinvent yourself every 5 to 7 years, which I like. I think that's valuable. Like find a new industry or find a new specialty and just go be an expert on that. And that's the value of this job, is that we're able to do that and we're incentivized to do that. So that the critical minerals is it for me. So what's been exciting to me is recognizing how there's some really, when we all of a sudden lithium becomes an important element that we care about, it turns out that there's some information about how lithium like moves around on Earth through tectonic processes, through magnet, but not as much as you'd think. Like there's still some really basic science questions about where is lithium? Why is lithium in basal brines and the Smackover formation, but not in other ones? That one's a bad example. But these new minerals, these new elements, and newly important minerals come on the scene. There's all sorts of science questions that come out of that discovery, and I think those are really exciting, and I also think are pretty important for the industry to understand. But I'm open to. I would love to talk to more people in sort of the mining sector, exploration sector, of like, what are the main problems that they're running up to? What do they wish they knew about critical minerals, about, neodymium that they don't know? And I'd love to know more about those questions. I mean, that's been my task for the last couple of years, is asking those questions, trying to get that opinion, like what do those people want to know more about, because that's where the research geologist at a big state university that has a really, really high caliber geoscience program, those are things we can tackle and build partnerships with companies to do that type of stuff. So
you've now put that out there, and
oh, there we go. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
You've now put that out there. So
please
love that.
Please send me a message. I would love to talk about this stuff.
So we will, at the end of this, have like Camp Geo, Planet Geo, your website, and LinkedIn all on here. Great. So everyone will know where to find you. But I love that you put that out there, because as a search consultant, we have people that say, hey, I need an expert in lithium exploration. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't exist.
That's exactly right. That's such a good example. Like, that doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Whereas there are copper that exists for copper, that exists for lead zinc, that exists for, what an economic geologist would have done over the last 30 years ago. And we've kind of, it's this dual thing where we've got a whole bunch of new elements that are newly relevant. And I don't want to be too casual about this. There are people who've studied lithium a lot, who know a lot about lithium pegmatites, who know a lot about those systems, for sure. But there's not enough of those people. And it's like, one professor at one university, one professor at another university, and that's it. There's not that many of them. And so we've got that going on. Well, at the same time, in my generation, we didn't train any economic geologists. Like, all the economic geologists retired in the 90s, and we didn't rehire them. There was other interesting scientific fields, at least in the U.S. Canada still has a pretty healthy economic geology program. Australia, many other countries do. But in the U.S., we didn't replace the economic geologists. Therefore, we didn't train any economic geology. Therefore, we didn't offer economic geology classes to the undergrads. And there's this huge cascading effect from that. And I'm looking at the job market for professors, and most, I would say, this might be an exaggeration, but half of the job ads for professors at research schools in the United States are for something to do with critical minerals, economic geology type stuff. And so that's really exciting. I think we have this new suite of elements that matter that we don't understand fundamentally, how they operate on Earth, what's important for controlling these things. There's good hypotheses out there, but they need to be tested. So that's just like a super exciting place to be. And I'd like to think myself and my research group are starting to build some expertise in that space. And I would love to develop, consulting relationships that help me understand what the industry wants, to pass that along to students. I could, work in those spaces a little bit. So it's very forward looking, but I would love to, for me personally, that's what's motivating, is to do that societally relevant stuff. And it was actually some of the emeritus professors at Penn State who were here in the 70s and 80s, they said that a consulting contract, like as a professor, most professor contracts have the ability to consult is written into your contract. So like, I don't know, a day a week or 2 days a month or something like that. You're allowed to consult. And I was always curious why that existed, because I know very few people who've ever consulted, that are practicing. But what they said was, in their day, that was how your consulting contracts was how you kind of showed the university that you were doing societally relevant stuff, that your expertise was societally relevant, is because you could charge a consulting fee for your expertise. And the university loved that, because you were connecting students with jobs, you were like liaising with industries regionally, and that was really valuable. And that was like the currency of the job, was like, are you doing a lot of consulting? That's really good. Okay, good job. Pat on the back. Here's a raise. Like, you're doing great. Keep doing that. And that hasn't, from my view, that is uncommon now. Yeah. But I'd love to see that become more common. I think that's a healthy approach, maybe. So
I think it's really important. I think connecting students to their next roles, being an advocate for them, but also just, as you said, being societally relevant and understanding what's going on, and why are we teaching this, and how does that translate to something that you're going to see? Because, I mean, when I first started this recruitment stuff years and years ago, I was out of university and I was not a mining professional, and I had to go and teach myself and learn and visit mine sites and things like that. But when I finally, maybe 5 to 8 years into this, it was a downturn, and I went and spoke at a conference, and everybody was, in mining, everybody's either really excited and drinking beer or crying in their beer, and there's almost no balance between, but there's definitely
That's
beer.
Great.
And
that's funny.
And so everybody was sort of crying in their beer at this conference, and I had the opportunity to talk to, it was like bachelor's, master's, geoscience, geology students in Canada. Yeah. They're like, how are we going to find a job? And I was like, look, call me. I'll help you with your resume, all of this stuff. And they were like, actually, let's back up a little bit. What does a day in the life of like a entry-level geologist look like? And I'm thinking, oh my God, you've just come out of school or are about to in Canada with lots of resources and mines around you, and you don't even know what you're getting yourself into. And I thought, like, what a disconnect between education and industry. And so if you have professors that can help with that, or say, I have been there, and let them know what that's going to look and feel like in some respect, or give them somebody else to talk to outside of a speaker at a conference, that's such a win.
So valuable. And I think, there are people, I don't want to give the impression that nobody's doing that, because there are a lot of people who do that really, really well. I just don't think myself, I've not been very good at that in the past. And it's something I want to certainly be better at, is connecting those dots and having more touch points that I can provide to students, to the industry in whatever capacity they want to go in. And so, things like I'm working on getting my professional geology license, a geologist license, just because I need to understand the process of if I'm going to tell students to do it. And why not just go get it? Because then I understand what the tests are, and I can advise better, right? It's the same for the consulting contracts. Like, I would love to to do that, do some work on the side that plugs me into the industry a bit better, so then I can also pass that learning on to students as well. So yeah,
as I said, you've put it out into the universe, and now
right.
Hopefully somebody that listens to my podcast will then contact you and be like, Jesse, listen, we need all of these things.
If you want to know, if you want somebody to think about geochronology and zircons and things like that, great. Yeah, we can totally do that. That's awesome.
We'll just bullet point out a list of all of the really important things, and somebody will be like, listen, Jesse, you are the answer to all of the questions that are keeping me up at night.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
So that's the goal. Well, I know that we're sort of running out of time, so I want to be mindful of that because I feel like you told me that you... Okay.
I should leave in 10 minutes probably. So.
Okay. So in my research, and I'm going a very, very different direction all of a sudden because I saw it on my notes page here in front of me, and God forbid the ADHD not capture my train of thought. So as I was doing my online stalking, which is my favorite part of podcasting, I see that you and your wife run a side business and create stone art bookends.
Yeah. This was a definite COVID project. Growing up, at an early age, I got into rock collecting or mineral collecting a bit, right? So which meant visiting rock shops, and in the rural part of Michigan that I grew up in, there's a few. And you'd go into these rock shops, and there'd be a bunch of little minerals around. It was inevitably a guy who owned it, and in the back he'd have his rock saws, and he'd have his the tools of the trade where he's cutting and polishing and doing all this stuff, and that always really interested me. And so then in college, I don't know how I found them, but a couple rock saws that were small, and I'd done some of this stuff just as a hobby, lapidary stuff as a hobbyist. But I always had in the back of my head, I want to own a rock shop someday. I'd love to be the professor who also owns the rock shop and gets my hands dirty and makes stuff, super fun. But then during COVID, I'd expressed this to my wife, and then during COVID, she's like, this Etsy thing's really taken off. Why don't you just buy a rock saw, and we're at home anyways, just start making stuff and we'll sell it. And I was like, okay, well, we'll do that. So we bought a little rock saw, started making some bookends, and then paid off the rock saw way quicker than I thought I was going to. So I was like, okay, now I need a bigger rock saw. And so it's blossomed into that. I mean, I think this is the Etsy shop has... I think that's one of the things that's, with all the busyness, all the things you listed who are working on, that one's taken the most hit of not doing so much stuff. But we do stuff for our own house, and I still love going out collecting rocks and cutting them on the rock saw. It's like big kid geodes, you just don't know what's inside, and it's let's cut it out, see what it looks like inside, and maybe it's cool, polish it. And we make bookends for gifts and some, wall art type stuff. There's one behind me that you can see there.
I was going to say, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, right? So we're currently in the process of reactivating the Etsy shop. But yeah, that's the entrepreneurial vein of
I had to ask, and I like vein, that's a very geologist term as well. There we go. So,
absolutely.
We've got all these things layered in here. Well, I love that, and I'll tell a very quick story because, kids are great, and they're full of various interests. And my 5-year-old, a few years ago, I would say I'm going to work or whatever, going to a mine. And so one of my good friends and I took our kids to the mining museum here in Colorado Springs.
Oh, cool.
And so now he thinks that's where mom works. I work from home. And he knows I work from home.
Yeah.
We pass the mining museum, and every day on the way to school, because we pass it every day on the way to school, he says, Mom, that's where you work.
That's where you work.
But he also thinks I do way cooler stuff than I do, and which has gotten him interested in primarily geology. And so we have a rock tumbler. We don't have a rock saw yet. We have a massive rock collection upstairs that I swear is going to eat its way through the floor and fall on my head one day. And so
a budding geologist.
We frequent rock shops everywhere we go. And in Colorado, there are a number of them.
Everywhere.
And so the more remote, the weirder place you go, the cooler the rock shop. And I've spent far too much money on rocks, I will just say.
Yes, so, I agree
and he knows
completely.
What they are. And so
that's awesome. But it's the thing, you got to lean into it, right?
Yes.
The kid's excited about it, you just got to lean into it. That's great. Absolutely.
So I'm going to send up your way and be like, listen, talk to Dr. Jesse because he will teach you all of the cool stuff.
Oh my goodness.
And where it comes from.
There's a couple good people on YouTube who do the lapidary stuff that I watch for, like, tips and tricks, and they're always kind of doing the rock reveal where they cut it and then they open it up on the thing. It's super fun, and it's great.
It's very fun.
But there's nothing like holding it in your hand and doing it yourself. So
well, in our backyard, I think he's collected every quartz that has existed, and now they're in a pile on our deck. And
perfect, because
they're fairly easy to identify. And now he's working on granite, and I'm like, we're not going to have any rocks left in the yard. So this is our afternoon every day.
That's great.
Come home and collect rocks. And
but what else could you? What could be more fun? That is too good. So that warms my heart hearing that. That is great.
So we'll see what happens with this. We could go a lot of different directions.
Oh, but, totally.
And he knows if, like, one day, because I was like, listen, this pile is out of control and he's going to run out of things to do. I threw them all back in the yard. And he was like, Mom, you threw my rocks back in the yard. I worked so hard to collect these. And I was like, oh, God, I'm so
sorry. I'm so bad mom. Yeah.
Bad mom.
Oh,
that
mom. Is funny. Well, I'm so happy to hear that. That is great. I love hearing stories like that. Actually, my best friend from college has the same. His daughter was he was like texting me, what kind of rock tumbler should I get for my daughter's birthday? I was like, oh man, how long do you have? Let me go down the rabbit hole. This is great.
Well, I also like that it's a lesson in not instant gratification, because some of these things you're tumbling for quite some time, and like you've got all the different grains and all the things to get them to
and you get the ones that
don't.
You put them in there and they don't look very good at the end, and you're disappointed, and that's okay.
And also they start out much bigger and then they turn into something smaller, and that at 5 is a very rough lesson. Mom, it's not even close to as big as it was. And I'm like, well, let's talk about why that makes sense.
that happens. Yeah. Oh, that's
anyway, that was a big tangent as well as bookends.
That's awesome.
This is podcasting at its finest. So,
exactly right.
I guess in parting, potentially, I will certainly link everywhere to find Jesse, but I want to sort of leave on one potential question.
Sure.
What advice to scientists, educators, professionals would you give so that they can talk about education and why this is important a little bit better?
Ooh, okay. What advice would I give? That's a tough one. I would say just start talking. And don't be afraid to change it quickly. Like, iterate back and forth. I mean, it goes back to our podcast, like topic conversation. I'm really bad at predicting what I think is important or what I think is interesting. The people who are listening do not always agree with that. And sometimes, like, one of the main learnings we've found is that our listener base loves going deep into stuff. They have an almost infinite ability to go deep into a topic. And I would not have guessed that. I would not have thought that there'd be so many people willing to go into like a super PhD level depth of some weird geochronology topic or something. So just start talking. Try and distill it down to the one sentence. We have this writing class at Penn State that's taught by a very famous professor who's very good at communicating. And the exercise is for graduate students. They take this class, and the exercise is write your thesis down in one page, which is a pretty hard thing for a graduate student to do. Write your thesis down in one page. Then, cut it in half. Next week, it's cut it in half. Okay? Next week, cut it in half. Next week, cut it in half. Next week, cut it in half. Until they get 5 words for their thesis. And those have to be very well selected words when it's 5 words for an entire 4 or 5 year PhD thesis. But it's such a good exercise in, like, make it simple, make it understandable, distill it down. And so I would say, like, work on distilling it down, make it as simple as possible, make it as punchy as possible, and don't be afraid to keep changing. Just talk. Just start the process. Start communicating, and then be quick about iterating. You say, oh, that one didn't really stick, I'm going to change it. That hook didn't land like I wanted it to. I'm going to change it.
Yeah.
And get a bunch of feedback. And so
I find it very, very relevant and certainly something I haven't thought about it in that way, but it will change the way that I write.
definitely did for me too. And, I don't know, there's just so many good science communicators out there that are great, whether it's Instagram or YouTube, or I'm not on TikTok, but apparently there's people on TikTok, podcasts. Like, listen to those people and don't be afraid to steal what they say. I mean, we do that all the time. Like, take good ideas and reframe it and then regurgitate it back to your students or people in your orbit. So, yeah.
Well, they say what success leaves clues, right? And so if somebody else has found that, then it's okay. Like, take those breadcrumbs and keep moving forward. So I love that. Well, anything that I missed? Anything else that we should cover that I think that's
it.
2 pages of questions I didn't ask you.
No, I don't think so. Will you? I know you go to mining conferences. Will you be at the AEMA? You will be. Oh,
I will be.
I'm going too. And this is going to be one of my first mining conferences. We should definitely grab a aforementioned beer or dinner or something like that.
We will do that.
If you have the time.
And I will talk offline, but AEMA is one of my favorite conferences. And,
good. Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
So, yes. And huge student involvement. I am sure that we can loop you into the student lunch and the student mixer and the poster contest and all kinds of things.
Cool.
So
I'd love to. It's my first time going to this conference, and it was suggested to me by some of the alumni, and I found some money to support me going. So I'm excited about it, but I'm new to the system. So that'd be great. Let's talk offline
tag along
about it.
with me, and we'll have a great time. So
I love it. Awesome.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
I'm all excited. I'm like, I get a brand new person at AEMA.
Yeah,
so
there we go. Perfect.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jesse, so much for sharing your time with us. I love our conversation and picking your brain, and I'm really excited to see all of the inquiries that come to you on all of the random critical minerals stuff and consulting.
Perfect.
And who knows what else, rock bookends for their
there we go.
Office
exactly.
Or whatever.
We could do some custom stuff. Why not? That sounds great. You got a cool rock? I'll cut it.
Send it off. Send it off.
There we go. I love it.
Well, awesome. Enjoy the day. Thank you so much for being here. And I guess my closing notes would be, if you enjoyed the episode, only if you enjoyed it, make sure to rate it wherever you're listening and share it with a friend or colleague in the industry. If you have ideas for us, we're open to hearing them. And thank you so much for listening to Ore-atory, where mining minds meet big ideas. Thank you.